The softness of light and of shadows is determined by the size of a light. And I've just created a simple free point light here. And if we rendered this with Mental Ray or with the Scanline renderer, we would get super hard shadows everywhere because a point light has no volume. And in order to get soft shadows with a standard ray tracer, the light has to have some volume. The art renderer has to have volume to lights because it's a physically based renderer, and infinitesimally sized point lights don't really exist in the real world. And that's the rule with ART. You can't do anything that doesn't exist in the real world. And because of that, any point light is going to have a default volume for the art renderer. Let's take a look at that. If we go into the render setup dialog in the art renderer tab, I'm actually just going to knock this down to draft quality of 20 decibels to speed up our renders. Scroll down near the bottom and you'll see advanced point light diameter is defaulted to 0.394 inches. Any and all point lights in the scene, such as this one, are going to be interpreted as having a certain volume, a certain diameter. But of course, we can change that in the light parameters. Let's see the difference here between a small area or small volume and a larger volume. I'll render it with this default setting. Give focus to the perspective view and click in it if you need to. Click the render button. We'll get a draft quality rendering. And if you look really closely, you may notice that the shadow is a little bit softer here and a little bit harder there. All right, now let's change that radius. Instead of doing it here, I would prefer to do it from the light parameters so I can have each light potentially have a different size. Close that dialog. I want to select my light and then go into its modify panel. And in its parameters, we can scroll down. We're looking for a section labeled Shapes/Area Shadows. And by default, it's going to be a point light. From this pull-down list, we can choose different light shapes. For example, if we wanted to do a fluorescent tube, we might choose cylinder. In this case, I'm going to choose sphere. And now we have a sphere around that light to indicate its size. We can change that size here. I'll just leave it at the default value I got, which is 5.5 inches. We'll do another test rendering. Make sure we have focus on the perspective view. Click in it if needed. To compare these, let's make a clone of this rendered frame window. Go up here and click on Clone Rendered Frame Window. That'll make a copy of that view. We can pull that over to the side. And then in the main window, click Render again and give it a moment. And we can now see a couple of things. First of all, we're seeing a reflection here, and that's going to happen because I've just got a neutral material, or in fact no material on these objects, and ART is going to create those reflections unless we assign a perfectly diffuse material. But more importantly, I'm going to see that the shadows are super soft here. Compare that to the other version. This version has a radius of 0.394 for the light as set by the ART renderer. And then this version has got a radius of 5.5 inches as set in the light parameters. The softness of the light is going to be determined by its physical size. All right, that's how we set the light shape and play around with its radius.